Palumbo here with an RX Muscle news update, and here to join me is Shawn Ray with the 2019 year in review.
It went fast.
You know, it's funny, like half the stories, like because we've mentioned these stories, you've been banned and blocked from people's social media. Isn't that kind of funny?
That's the day we're living in, Dave. This age of political correctness and sensitivity, you can't criticize bodybuilders these days. Like in the old days, when you criticize a bodybuilder, the bodybuilder didn't find out about it till the magazine came out 3 months later. And by that time, we were already focused on the next thing. Right. But in real time, these bodybuilders can choose to have a feeling about how it's reported or whether it's accurate or why you didn't. You know, I remember I did a thing on Dallas McCarver a couple years ago, and he posed for Jim Mannion, and I thought he was out of shape, and I thought he was pale, and I just thought it was kind of a poor performance. And he said, why didn't I contact him to find out what was wrong? And I'm like, I'm only going off of the videos you guys put out, right?
Right.
And he says, well, I was throwing up for 3 days, and I was sick, and I was all this stuff. I said, well, none of your videos said any of that before you actually put yourself on film. And of course, I wound up on the do not talk list. So it happens. It happens a lot more than.
Yeah, I have people to get mad at me too. It happens, you know. But the job of the press is to report on what happens, and you report on the good stuff, and you report on the stuff that's not so good. And unfortunately, you know, you can't like everything that you hear, you know. So it is what it is.
We Monday morning quarterback most of the stuff that we see, Dave. Most of it's already put out there. We come in and we commentate on it, and then we are the bad guy, or they love us, one or the other.
All right, let's get to it. I got a bunch of stories here that I think are relevant for the 2019 season. I'm sure some people think of stuff we didn't think of, but these are the stories that I found to be pretty relevant. And I think probably the most, I guess, obvious one would be the fact that Brandon Curry won not only the Arnold Classic, but he also won the Mr. Olympia and took over the vacated title and is now representing the sport as the so-called the CEO of bodybuilding. What does this mean for bodybuilding for a physique like Brandon Curry to have won not only the Arnold but the Olympia, and now he's the guy to beat, so to speak?
Well, we know it's only happened 2 other times, and I hate to pull that history card, but we watched Ronnie Coleman do it back in 2001, and we also watched Dexter Jackson do it. And so for him to join that elite group of bodybuilders at this stage of his career says something for where he's at. I mean, he's positioned himself nicely to be in the conversation of one of the great bodybuilders, but like Ronnie Coleman and Dorian Yates both said, he would struggle to make the top 6 of a 1990s Olympia lineup, and that's not taking anything away from Brandon. You're only as good as the guys you stand next to. But what Brandon did was nothing short of amazing, because everything seemed to line up for this guy in the sense that Rhoden wasn't there and Phil Heath wasn't there and Big Ramy wasn't there. Someone's got to win. And so we got to take our hats off to Brandon for showing up and doing the business and being present. No one on that lineup could have been a more worthy champion on the night. It wasn't a controversial win. Yeah. This was a win that I think he earned and he deserved. So we can't dispute the fact that he's the Mr. Olympia champion. And he set the tone by not only winning in Ohio in the same calendar year, but he had a long run-up. He won the first Arnold Classic over in Brazil in 2013. He slowly and gradually proved himself. He won over here at the Lou Ferrigno show out in Palm Springs. He quietly beat several of the top front runners, and then he did it on the biggest stage, on the biggest day. Who are these bodybuilders have we thought were going to pull that off? And they didn't. I mean, Cedric McMillan still, we were waiting for him to arrive. Right. We were waiting for potentially Hadi Choopan to come in and upset the entire apple cart. I mean, so many bodybuilders, even Big Ramy, we thought would potentially win the Olympia. And Brandon Curry, when the opportunity presented itself, came through and delivered the goods. He's my bodybuilder of the year.
And I actually believe that the battle at the Arnold, which was in the beginning of 2019, in March, was actually probably a more competitive show than the Olympia, because I think that Bonac and Curry were at their best at that show, and it was a coin flip at best, you know.
You're right, and again, I've always said this: unless you've been through this, Dave, from the Arnold to the Olympia, competing in the Arnold, competing in Olympia, unless you've done it, I mean, it's the closest thing to death that many bodybuilders experience. That's why I take my hat off to Dexter Jackson, because he's very consistent.
He's done it a lot.
Yeah, but Brandon delivered. On the right time, on the biggest stage, in front of the biggest audience we've ever had at the Olympia. So who can knock Brandon Curry for what he accomplished? It's amazing.
If Brandon hadn't done the Arnold and won it, so you know, with such an amazing look at that show and beat a really good William Bonac at the show, would he still have been Mr. Olympia if he showed up at the Olympia looking the same way?
Well, there's so many what ifs, Dave. I mean, because he also beat Cedric McMillan, who a year before that Bonek victory was the Arnold Classic champion too. You have to factor in all the things that happen after the Arnold Classic. These guys are all on tour. They've all got these sponsorship obligations. They're all coming from the four corners of the world. I mean, Brandon lives in Tennessee, but we know he spends most of the year in Kuwait.
Yeah.
We know that Cedric McMillan is a lifetime military person. We know William Bonek went through a breakup with his trainer that was there from day one.
Yeah.
I mean, in Brandon Curry, we didn't know this going into the Olympia, but he was on baby number 5. I mean, he's got 4 kids at home. So the stress levels for all of these bodybuilders to arrive and do the business on the day of the Olympia is equally exponentially hard. For Brandon to do it and keep it all together and then actually get rewarded, it's one of those things that, will they give it to Brandon? And Brandon showed us not only at the Arnold in March, but he also showed us in May at Jim Mannion's Pittsburgh guest posing with all of those guys. I remember when Shawn Rhoden showed up looking like shit. Yeah. Brandon Curry was the front runner there, and he stayed the course and he won. And hats off to him.
Yeah, great year for him. Definitely banner year.
Absolutely.
Another big one I think we have to mention, Dexter Jackson winning number 29, on his list of all-time wins. He's been the winningest bodybuilder for a number of years now. I think he wants to get 30, he said, although I'm sure once he gets 30, he'll want to go past that. He wins Tampa. He gets the number 29. He turns 50 in November. He's placed his top 5 at the Olympia. Dexter's still on top of the world. I don't know how he's doing it, but he is the iron horse for sure of the bodybuilding world. Yeah,
and prior to Dexter, we were talking about Vince Taylor, and the difference between the two was that they created the Masters Olympia right in line with Vince Taylor's career. Yeah. If you have the Masters Olympia now, like they tried to, remember they had the Masters World Championships in Florida back in 2011, I believe it was. Dexter won that. Dexter would be, 10-time Masters Olympia champion if they have it, because there's nobody at his age doing what he's done on any level, including Vince Taylor back in the day. That would have been a nice rivalry for those two. Vince just happened to be a lot older than most of the guys when they actually created it. But Dexter is true to the game in terms of saying, look, what am I going to do? This is what I do. If he stops doing it, takes a year off, then we may be able to find some chinks in the armor. But he can actually, in 2020, find a show on the calendar, because there's plenty of them to choose from, to get victory number 30. I doubt it would be at the Mr. Olympia on Mr. Olympia 56, but I believe he can find that win if he strategically picks the right contest. Yeah, There's no question.
I agree. I want to talk about the next story, which is the Classic Physique division, where we've had a lot of, trading back and forth. What is the definition of Classic Physique? George Peterson won the Arnold Classic earlier in the year. By the end of the year, now he's switching to 212 next year. Chris Bumstead is now the new Mr. Olympia, takes out Breon Ansley, obviously by a very small margin. But the definition of Classic Physique seems to have been thrown down, and we're seeing Peterson and Keon Pearson moving on next year to the 212 division. Have we seen a shift in maybe what the definition of Classic is?
Well, no doubt. I think that George should have gone into the 212 following the Arnold Classic, correct?
Yeah, he won Classic there. Very controversial, yeah.
So from that contest, he should have went into the 212 division, because that's what he's suited for. He's a bodybuilder with classic shorts on. Mm-hmm. Whereas Chris Bumstead, with the long limbs and the artistic style of posing that he presents, he separates himself from being just a bodybuilder. I mean, Bumstead, to me, doesn't look like a bodybuilder. He looks classic. Yeah. He looks like, a slender version of a Bob Paris type. No, he doesn't have the back detail in crevasses that maybe Breon Ansley won, and we always are conditioned that the Olympias are won from the back. But Bumstead brought an element of class, an element of elegance to the Classic that they created that division to be. And so he pulled that off, I think, in a narrow victory. But it definitely sets the stage for 2020, because there is no set concrete definition of what Classic is now that Bumstead is the champion. I mean, we had a couple of years of Breon. Danny Hester set the bar. I think that George Peterson's making the right choice in going into 212 along with Keon. These guys having the choices to move into these other areas is beautiful. I think that if James Flex Lewis had to win into the Open Olympia, he could have been the first double Mr. Olympia title holder, because I think he would have challenged Brandon Curry very well. So now we're going to see these guys starting to move out into the other divisions, because there's nowhere to go. I mean, George Peterson, there's nowhere to go in that division, so he needs to move on and just go ahead and let his body grow and fill out. I think it'll happen also on some of the other ladies' divisions too, now with the inclusion of wellness coming.
What do you think about that wellness class, just off the record, not as part of the story? I think it's a little ridiculous, to be honest with you. I think it's just we don't need another division. But, I mean, obviously it's warranted because there's a lot of people doing it. I know in South America. What is your take on it?
Well, you have to consider they're adjusting to it's a supply and demand situation. All the curvaceous, round, fuller girls are disenfranchised when you're talking about bikini, because most of the bikini girls are very slender, as you know. The figure girls are very hard, as you know. There's got to be a sweet spot for somebody that doesn't want to lose all the muscle and all the curves. Why? You see how successful it is in South America. Will it translate in America? I'm not 100% sure that we have the same gene pool that can actually fill up a wellness category. Like, I have my show in Hawaii, right? I have my show in Hawaii. I'm really thinking, do I want to add that division? Because in what we have, we don't see it. But now that I'm adding it, you've got a lot of Samoans and a lot of thick chicks. And some of those girls might go, well, maybe I can get in there and I can do something. Give them an opportunity.
Yeah, but don't you think after a while, it's like we're just making divisions for people who have, like, unusual looking body parts? I mean, why not make a division for guys who have good necks? We got the neck division, and the guys who will develop their necks, they'll do all kinds of trap exercises. And
listen, it's still a contest of sum total of all body parts. Creating the wellness division, and you can call it whatever you want. Yeah. It's thick chicks. It's girls that don't have to lose all that muscle, can stay away from diuretics, that don't have to be massive as a bodybuilder. All you got to do is go on Instagram. You see girls that are like 3 and 4 weeks out from their show, and you're like, she's perfect. But to stand on stage next to a Janet Lung and some of these other girls, they're going to have to lose all of those curves. I think it's a beautiful thing because I'd rather see these wellness chicks and go to South America to see the girls with the curves and the fullness. Dude, they lose all of that stuff when they have to actually compete against what we already have. So let's see how it plays out. I think you might change your tune a year from now.
No, I won't change my tune, but I think anything that grows the sport is good. I'm glad I don't really go to that many shows anymore because these things are just getting longer and longer and longer.
You're true. It's long.
I think at some point you have to say, all right, look, we can't give a trophy to everyone. Let's find, you guys are going to have to work, change your physique to fit one of our categories. We can't keep making new categories. Like you said, I think in South America, the look is different. The genetics are different, like you said. And I think that's why it works down there. I don't know if it's going to work as a worldwide division, but
I agree. I agree, which is why they shouldn't have it at every single show, and they will. And what we're going to see is some of the best of the worst, because some of these thick girls are going to think, hey, I don't have to diet as hard. I don't have to lean out.
It's going to see fat girls in there, yeah.
We're probably going to see a few fat girls. But guess what, dude? There's guys that like fat girls too.
I know, but that doesn't mean they have to be up on stage.
To be honest, Dave, I'm tired of the skinny girls, all right? I am tired of looking at a bunch of skinny girls. Put some meat on the bone, all right? Jeez.
Yeah, but you don't have to get up on a big stage in a bikini to say, just to do it. But all right, let's move on.
Let's see what happens.
Let's move on before I get in trouble. Big Ramy, leaving Oxygen Gym, not competing in 2019. I don't think anyone would have expected both of those things to occur. We thought he was a lifer over there. We also thought we were going to see Ramy challenge for this vacated Olympia title, essentially, and neither of those came to fruition. Theoretically, at least what he's saying is he had a shoulder injury. I don't know exactly what happened. Was it a good idea for Ramy to miss the 2019 season? And what is the significance of it moving forward into 2020?
I think with all the things that was going on in his life, sitting out the year was the best play, because he would have brought a less than stellar physique, because all the pieces were not right. We knew his head wasn't right, the training camp wasn't right, the organization for him wasn't right. Take a step back, preserve your health. He was injured. You know that he was injured. Yeah. So he had to deal with the injury too. So 2020 is shaping up good for him. Jumping into the Arnold Classic, into the very deep end, he could punch a bunch of people in the mouth and set himself up nicely for September, or just the opposite can happen. So
that's the problem, yeah.
I do like the risk that he's taking. In my day, it wouldn't have been a risk. It would have just been business as usual. I mean, you got to compete against the best to be the best. And so I would rather him do this show than show up in New York or show up in Tampa or show up in even California for that matter. You're one of the elite bodybuilders. Get up there, earn your stripes, do what Brandon Curry did, put it all on the line, and set yourself up. If he wins the Arnold Classic, Dave, we are talking about a potential new 2020 Olympia champion come September.
Shouldn't he really have to win the Olympia? I mean, isn't this like a do or die? I mean, if Ramy doesn't win the Arnold, I mean, it's actually, he failed basically, don't you think?
Well, no, let's take a step back. he doesn't have to win the Arnold. We know that this is his first time coming back after a full year off, after battling an injury. We talked about it last time. Sometimes training around an injury, you cannot train 100%. He may be training a little cautiously. He's got to get his feet wet to find out where he's at in the pecking order. If he comes in the Arnold and gets second or third, we got to question, who is he getting second or third to? Is it a William Bonek?
Right.
Is it a Dexter Jackson? He's in that mix, so he doesn't have to necessarily win, but it will set the tone for the balance of the year. Winning would make it a lot easier because now we're like really talking about Big Ramy. But if he gets a second or third, that's a respectable comeback place to start. But I think he should stop there and wait for the Olympia. Does that qualify you in the top 3 of the Arnold for the Olympia, or does he?
I don't think so. I think it's only first place. But
then he should go on to Australia and try to get that victory.
Yeah. He, as far as I'm concerned, Big Ramy at this point in his career should be able to slam dunk this show. The only way he doesn't slam dunk it is if he doesn't come in the best shape of his life. He's had the whole year to prepare for this. There's no reason and there's no excuse why he doesn't come in peeled to the bone for this show. If he can't do it, it means that there's either something wrong with his body, which I don't believe, or the formula that he's using, that he's used 1,000 times already that hasn't worked, is still not working. And I don't know.
Let me tell you, Dave, I think he has the most pressure, and we have the biggest expectation. It's still in a lineup that has 4 Arnold Classic champions in it. 5 if you want to count Johnny Jackson's win over in South Africa, and he's like 47 years old. Right. I don't think Johnny can beat Big Ramy. No. But Ramy's got to get through a 50-year-old Dexter Jackson, which he should.
Yeah.
And Dexter was 4th in the freaking world, so let's keep perspective.
Yes.
He should beat Dexter. And now he's got to beat William Bonek, who was the first runner-up. I believe he can get past Cedric, because Cedric, I think, is going to have a hard time coming in condition. He's been a very fortunate bodybuilder, picking the right shows, beating guys on genetics. This is a show that he's won before. I think it's coming up too soon for Cedric to expect a whole lot from him. You're absolutely right. This should be Big Ramy's moment. If he doesn't rise to this occasion, again, he may as well go back to fishing.
I don't think he can recover if he doesn't come in at his best at this show. There's no excuse.
I'm with you on that.
He has no pressure.
Ramy should win this show. I've been next to Ramy when he's won. I've been next to him when he's lost. In New York, where he fell out, I think he was like 15th or something, came back the next year and he won it. He is the X factor in this show. And of course, his calves aren't going to be any better than yours are right now. We don't expect that. But he should bring those quads down. Those quads need to be streamlined, man. And he should just be doing lunges and leg extensions, and that's it. So we need to see some changes in his physique. He can't bring the same thing. No. Bring the quads down. He'll look much wider up top. He'll look a little bit more symmetrical with those anemic calves of his, but we got to see some conditioning on his part. If he's not improved, I'm jumping off the Big Ramy bandwagon.
Yeah, me too. All right, let's talk about some of the people that we lost in the industry this year, because this was a big year. You know, it seemed like every weekend at some point, Shawn, we were reporting on someone passing. I mean, starting with probably one of the most notable names, which was Franco Columbu. And, you know, a lot of people figure, well, Franco's older. He didn't die of a heart attack. He had a swimming accident.
I went to the celebration of life for Franco, and we can call it what it was, the swimming accident or whatnot, a pulmonary heart attack. I was there when Arnold said Franco has this tendency of disappearing. And apparently he was aware that Franco's doctor told him not to travel.
Oh, really?
Arnold was aware that Franco was advised not to travel.
Why was he advised? What was wrong with him?
Something had to have been going on that only Arnold and the people close to Franco knew. Some speculate that maybe Franco went home to die, and his entire family's in Sardinia. Right. And there's a reason why he chose to go there. I wasn't there, and I hate to speculate on how he actually died. We do know that he drowned, and the heart attack is what precipitated that. But he wasn't fit for travel, and I think if Arnold wants to believe that he went home to be with his family, and that way everybody was in attendance for the service, right. Then hey, big ups to Franco, because he spent the better part of his life here, and he had a humongous funeral back there with all the Italians.
Sure.
78 years old, you know, the closer we get to that age, we always say it's a little bit too soon, but the average life expectancy for, you know, a man, let alone a bodybuilder, is 72, 73 years old. So Franco left us with a lot of memories. It's not how you die, it's how you live. And Franco lived a rich, very full life, affected millions of people, right. Not just bodybuilders. We know that at the Celebration of Life, Franco was a lot of things to a lot of people. Doctor, chiropractor, motivator. I mean, listen, it's never the right time to die. But we got to give it up to Franco, what he contributed to the game.
How many people were at that celebration of life?
Well, here in California, it was select. It was a small, intimate group. His family, his wife, his daughter, Arnold, and crew. It was notable that I'm surprised some of the names I would have expected to be there were not, that were local. Franco Columbu was missing. Samir Banu said he got the message a little bit late. Boyer Coe wasn't there. I was surprised there were some missing names, but again, it wasn't necessarily open to everyone. So I don't know who was actually invited.
Gotcha.
I was there. Flex Wheeler was there. Dexter Jackson, Shawn Rhoden. A lot of people were there to pay their respects to what Franco brought to the game. He won't be soon forgotten, that's for sure.
Yeah. Now, also fellow Italian, Gianluca Catapano also passed. I knew him. I know you knew him too. He lived in Vegas.
He lived in Vegas. He used to have a gelato place, and he was a mediocre bodybuilder that found a way to get a pro card.
Yeah.
I criticized him because the arms were always kind of funky and suspicious. I think he competed a little bit beyond his prime, but he was the most likable guy out there in Las Vegas, and he trained people too. And I'm not sure how he passed, but I was very surprised that he did. He was too young to go. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Probably like you're my age, probably right in that range.
Yeah, he was right in that group, 50 plus.
Jessup Wilcox, another guy from the Franco Arnold era.
Passes. I had heard he had fallen on some hard times a few years ago. People were trying to raise some money to help him. I'm not sure that there were some mental faculties that were gone awry. I know my father, he passed of dementia and
mine too.
And congestive heart failure in my dad. But I know that Joseph wasn't right in the head. I know that he wasn't in a financially beneficial place, and that he had been living a mediocre life out in Germany. But again, he was one of Germany's celebrated sons and a very close friend to Arnold and all the Germans, for that, Rolf Mueller, Gunther Schlierkamp. I mean, everybody that was a bodybuilder from Germany knew who Joseph was. I only had the pleasure of meeting him one time, and that was in retirement at one of the FIBOs. But the Germans definitely will miss him, and he paved the way for a lot of great German bodybuilders to come out of there.
Yeah, and he was well known because of that beard. No one had beards back in the
he was the only one, it seemed, that got away with a beard, because I don't know of any other successful. I mean, Boyer Coe tried a beard one time, but back in the day, he held his beard, I think, throughout. Yeah. Good for Joseph.
Now, a lot of people don't know this bodybuilder, but maybe you can give us the background, since you have a relationship with him. Paul Love was the father of, I believe, Flex Wheeler's ex-wife, right?
Correct. He had twin daughters, Madeline and Liz Love. I actually met Liz and I met the twins when they were 14 years old out here at the Orange County Muscle Classic, and I met Paul as a teenager. And Paul was one of the more successful bodybuilders. He actually promoted the '83 national championships that Bob Paris won, and of course that's when I started bodybuilding. And I was indoctrinated with Bob Paris winning, and I think it was who was second place? Roy Liedlmeyer. His training partner was second, and third place I believe was Mike Christian, and Gaspari was in that lineup. Very famous national championships in San Jose, which put Paul Love on the map. And he was one of the first very good, successful black bodybuilders coming up in the game. Promoted for many years thereafter, and his daughters were indoctrinated with bodybuilding. And as a matter of fact, Flex met one of his daughters at the California that was up there, and came back and married her for many years. They got 3 kids together. And he had a heart transplant at 80 years old, and the heart transplant was successful.
Wow.
I talked to the daughters, and they both said, they got more years out of him because of that transplant. Remember, Mike Matarazzo was waiting for a heart transplant. And died without one. And Paul got an extra 6 years. He had dementia. He was on the decline. He died at home with family and loved ones surrounding him just 2 days ago, I believe, 3 days ago. And his impact on the game won't be surely forgotten, because he also passed the torch off to George Jackson, who is now promoting a lot of shows up there in Northern California with Steve, one of the guys, Steve, I forget his name.
Are Flex's kids with Madeline, are they all girls?
He's got Pearl Faith, one of the two, Nia, and I think it's Darius. I think they have 3 kids together.
Oh, they have a boy?
Yes, they do.
What kind of genetics does Darius have now?
I think he played football. I don't know what he's doing these days. I'm not.
Gotta have great genetics with those 2 parents. Whoa.
Flexing, I mean, and Liz and Madeline, both the twins, they're just as well versed on bodybuilding as you and I are, because they were They were born into it, and of course, marrying Flex. Madeline was there for all of that stuff. They recently divorced like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. Flex must have some. I mean, that kid must have some great genetics if he really wanted to train. Because,
yeah, man. Well, Paul's not going to be forgotten, especially in the landscape of things here in California. Yeah. He was a huge impact in the NPC back in the day.
Speaking of California, we lost a really good one about a week ago. Shawn Rhoden, who used to be married to Tamer El Gundi. I actually met Shawn back in the 90s with Tamer when they were running a Gold's Gym up in Washington, Seattle, Washington. I went up there to do an appearance, and I did a consultation with them. They both wanted to get into the bodybuilding industry, and they wanted to know about nutrition. And I sat down with them, talked to them, and I've been friends with them since that long. And they were always together, and I knew they recently separated. I know, and
not recently. It's been a while, Dave. Actually, Tamer is married with a kid with another girl, but they continued to work together. She judged a lot of Tamer shows. Yeah, she worked right in the
muscle contest too.
Yeah, so she lived around the corner here in Irvine, and she was a neighbor. And I mentioned earlier, it was only a week ago Tuesday that she was crossing the street and got hit by a car. And me and my daughter actually drove past the crash scene, not knowing that it was her. It was, Christmas time, the holidays. Right. We saw all the lights, the ambulance. They had the flares in the street, and we didn't think anything of it. We just thought, how tragic on a holiday. And then I got home and conversed back and forth with Tamer, and we nailed it down to the time and the location. And it was right here across the street from where I work out in Irvine.
Shawn, you always hear, "Hey, don't take life for granted. You can walk across the street and get hit by a car." You hear that all the time, like people say that. Yeah, man. And she actually did. I mean, it's the wackiest, weirdest thing to lose someone, which I don't even think she was 40 years old yet, right?
No, and she's Russian born. I believe she was an only child. Her mom lived here in California. She's friends with a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, I was with her in December taking pictures with her and another judge, Ben Samimi, and Brian Bullman. And it's ironic, you start trying to play everything back, like the last conversation. You can never see this coming. It's like getting hit by lightning or getting bit by a shark. I mean, well, if you're in the ocean, your chances of getting bit by a shark are greater. But getting hit by a car walking is very rare. You can't say. I don't even know anybody that's got hit by a car walking, and I'm 54 years old. So it's tragic because she was in the prime of her life, worked with muscle contests, and again, she spent 10 years with Tamer back in the day. But everyone on the South in California knew her on the scene because she was a judge on the pro side and the amateur side, and of course, she was in the IFBB. So
she was a good bikini pro too, really good.
Yeah, I mean, she worked her way up through the ranks, and they haven't even set the funeral as far as I know, but. Wow. Between here and Las Vegas, there's a lot of people that knew Shawn that she impacted. And, of course, if I'm here, I'm going to go pay my respects to her. It's just, with every year you hear these stories, and it's like you're 6 degrees of separation.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And, of course, we lost the great one, Ed Corney, this year, too.
Yeah, and Ed Corney was, iconic for being in Pumping Iron. But, of course, without Arnold has really given him all the props for him realizing the importance of posing. Right. As a masterful posing, according to Arnold. I didn't get to see Ed pose in person, but of course, I knew Ed from around the way. And towards the end, we saw him at all the Arnold Classics, and in the wheelchair. He had some hip issues, and he was in a wheelchair for a long time. Towards the end there, but Ed, you'll never find anyone say a bad thing about Ed Corney and the things that he brought to our sport of bodybuilding. I'm not sure how old he was, but I got to say he had to be in 82, 83.
But he was supposed to die years ago, if you remember.
Yes,
and then
correct.
He had a stroke or something like that, and then he came back, and I remember I used to talk to him at the expo, the Arnold or the Olympia expo, every single time I would go there. And he said, he told me when he had the stroke, I'll be back. He could barely speak, and then he actually started speaking again, and he was picking up a 100-pound dumbbell in a booth. I was like, what the hell are you doing? And he just he said that training is what saved him.
I know Jay Cutler and Ramy from Michigan, they brought him out to the Jay Cutler Classic in Vegas, and they gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award. And it seems like when you start getting those awards, you don't have a whole lot left. I don't want any Lifetime Achievement
I don't want
any
Lifetime Achievement awards either, exactly. But not that anyone's giving me any.
He was very engaging, and you could tell that really, if it weren't for bodybuilding, he probably would have died a long time ago.
Absolutely.
And eventually we all are going to go. Ed lived a fruitful life, and he has a huge following over in Hawaii and in Northern California. Very impactful on people like Chris Tim and some of the other bodybuilders that came up. And, of course, his footprint on the posing side of things will never be erased from the annals of bodybuilding, because he was really one of the very first to actually show you the art of posing.
One of the more shocking, I think, for me at least, was because I didn't even know there was anything wrong with him, was the loss of former editor-in-chief of Muscle and Fitness magazine and former husband of Corey Everson, Jeff Everson. That was out of left field. I didn't even know there was anything wrong with him. And
well, I found out a little bit more afterwards in talking with Corey, who was just devastated. I mean, I think if you bring up Jeff's name, she'll be moved to tears.
Yeah.
She said she's married. She's got some kids that she adopted back in the day, but she's on record as Jeff is the love of her life. I mean, he created this thing that we know as Corey Everson.
Yeah.
They went to college together. I mean, they're out from Wisconsin doing their thing, and Jeff, she said that he had some complications going into this and was actually surprised he made it as far as he did, because he had a very strong powerlifting background, evolved into a bodybuilder, was one of the bigger guys on the 6 foot plus 280 side for the majority of his life, and a very accomplished writer, publisher. Remember, he was one of the founding people in the RX, MetaRx thing. With Dr. Scott Conley and Lee Labrada. Was editor-in-chief of Muscle and Fitness. And I think Corey was very lucky to have someone like Jeff handle that machine coming in as Miss Olympia in 1984 to 1989 it was. Jeff orchestrated the majority of how she was perceived by the general public, because Corey was an athlete. She was Miss Olympia, but she was a track athlete. And she could have been a whole lot more than just a bodybuilder. Jeff made sure that wasn't lost on the landscape of the publishing side of things. And of course, Jeff was one of those guys that knew a lot about supplements and a lot about the anabolic world. But he had some complications that he wasn't long for this world. Corey knew it, and the people close to him. And
was it heart related? What was the medical issue?
I think there was some issues with the heart, and there were some issues with blood pressure, and there was just a lot of things. He was having problems. He had a lot of arthritis. Had some issues walking and moving around. Gotcha. And Corey felt for him because, Corey got remarried and went on to have a family, whereas Jeff was solo and kind of living alone. But they never lost touch with each other. And I can't imagine losing someone like Corey said is like the love of her life. Even though there's other loves that brought her fullness, she was trying to be there for Jeff and wasn't able to save him. And that's going to live with her forever. Yeah, Jeff's a huge figure in our industry, especially since we came up with him.
Yeah, I remember, a lot. And Jeff and I had a, good relationship with Jeff too, especially when he ran the magazine Planet Fitness there and everything like that.
Yeah, he was big. He was big with, I think, even Muscle Media to Planet Fitness. You're correct. Yeah. And a lot of the girls, he had a very impactful relationship with a lot of the females coming up because he was married to Corey.
Yeah. Now, we also lost, we're not going to go into detail, we lost Darryl Stafford, who you competed with back in the day. I competed with a little bit towards the end of his career, but, he was a pro. And, he was a pretty popular bodybuilder back in the 90s.
Well, he was there at the Junior Nationals in '86. I got second to Eddie Robinson. Darryl was third. Very little known fact. And then we moved on to the '87 National Championships. Of course, I won that. And second place was Darryl Stafford. Wow. And Darryl actually went on to compete in the Masters. Remember, he made the comeback?
Yeah.
Well, when he made the comeback, he had already had some heart issues.
Oh, really?
So a lot of people had advised him to stay away from bodybuilding.
Didn't know that.
And he came back with some heart issues, and he went on and competed anyways. And it was shortly thereafter that this happened. But Darryl's death out of Georgia, which is where he made his mark, was out of the blue. A lot of people did not see that coming. Yeah. He was the most likable guy, very soft-spoken person, was a personal trainer, and a very accomplished bodybuilder at that.
Yeah. We lost Pete Trentz, and we lost Dan Alexander, too. So I want to just send out condolences to all the families. And if I missed anyone, I'm sure I did, because I feel like we lost a lot more than just that. We want to just send out their prayers to the family, and, of course, they'll be remembered. Now, another big story, I think maybe one of the biggest shockers of 2019 was the Olympia victory by Kamal El-Gargni in the 212 division. Everyone thought that the heir apparent there, Lunsford, was going to win that show with a cakewalk.
That's a natural assumption. I mean, Derek was second the year before to Flex Lewis. Flex Lewis graduates. Kamal was not really on the radar at that time. We might have thought that Ahmad Ashkanani, if he got in shape coming in off of the victory in New York, would be one of the guys that's a front runner because he'd been there challenging. He had also already won the Arnold Classic, but a lot of people missed the fact that Kamal El-Gargni won the Arnold Classic.
Yes.
And winning the Arnold Classic, like Hidetada Yamagishi, remember, that was a stacked lineup. David Henry was in that lineup. Right. He got kind of blown away. But Kamal was doing the business, and he brought in a little bit of that old man muscle. And I think you can see the difference in him and Derek Lunsford in terms of the quality, the density, the separation. Derek has a better structure. There's no question. which with those big billowing quadriceps and those wide shoulders, he's built like an open bodybuilder, Derek Lunsford is. But he came in a little bit too soft at prejudging, and I think it was too much ground for him to make up on the finals. Now, had he looked like he did at the finals at the prejudging, we might be talking about a different champion here. But Derek Lunsford, the future really does belong to him in the 212. Kamal going back to defend that title is going to be a very slippery trophy to hold on to, because I think Derek served notice, but Kamal, where he came from, if you have anyone has a chance to find out about Kamal's background, go look at it, Google it, find it. I mean, they tried to blackball him from even coming into the IFBB.
Yeah.
They really made him jump through some hoops.
Yeah. Not to mention the guy's 48 years old. He's not a young
47, 48 years old. He's not a spring chicken. Yeah. But there's something to be said for that old man muscle, like
Dexter.
Dexter continues to show us that there's nothing that can replace the quality and the density than time and age.
Yeah. And it's amazing that a 48-year-old guy can bring the level of leg size and conditioning, because usually we see the legs go, and his legs are really good for a guy of that age.
You want to see that? Go back to the 1985 Olympia, and I say that 1985 because I won the Junior World Championships that year, and Albert Beckles was the guest poser. Albert Beckles was second place to Lee Haney at 46, 48 years old. Amazing. In the 85 Olympia. So this is nothing new that we're seeing the quality of the muscle really deliver when it has to, when you do the business. I mean, Albert Beckles was challenging Lee Haney, and Lee Haney was 24 years old in 1985, and Albert was like 48 years old, so second in the world. And now we see this play out with the creation of the 212. Congratulations to Kamal.
Yeah. Let's talk about one of the biggest surprises. I don't think anyone in the house expected to see, maybe me, Hadi Choopan at the Olympia. I don't think anyone thought. Even the attorneys that I talked to on the show and interviewed, the immigration attorney said there's no way he's getting into the country. Few strings got pulled. Hadi wound up, arriving in California. Hadi Rambod picked him up at the airport, and he wound up having to make a big decision. Should I do the Open? Should I do the 212? He picked the Open. He placed third. Was it a good decision, Shawn? And what'd you think of the?
Yeah, I was just as surprised as you. I did not think he was going to get in. I mean, Donald Trump's laid down the freaking gauntlet for anybody from Iran coming over here and doing anything. Now, once we found out that he was in, I thought the Open is the only place for this kid to go. I was there in person when he got second place to Cedric McMillan over in Italy at the San Marino Pro a year prior. Kamal had already served notice to James Flex Lewis over in Korea a few years ago, and I thought he beat James Flex Lewis in head-to-head competition. Going in the Open was the best play based on all of those factors. No Shawn Rhoden, no Big Ramy, no Phil Keith. You got to go in the Open because, number one, that's where the money is. And I believe that at the end of the day, that's where the greatness lies. He could have been the 212 champion, but I think the impact of breaking into the top three, I thought he could have been second place, would have been longer lasting and more impactful, and then financially more rewarding. Because, look, at the end of the day, Dave, we're not – you can't – all you got I got this trophy over here behind me. The $70,000 that I got 20 years ago is gone, right?
Yeah.
And this guy's in the twilight of his career right now. You got to go for broke. And I think going for broke, beating Cedric, beating Dexter. Look at all the guys that this kid beat in this lineup, and all the stress he had to go through getting ready for the Olympia. I think all circumstances considered, Hadi had the most on his shoulders and the weight of a country to arrive at the Olympia and deliver the goods, and arguably could have been second place. Did you see the reception he got when he got back to Iran?
Oh, I mean, it was like a ticket.
It was like a presidential. Yeah. He didn't have to win. He just had to do good. And being in the top three in your first Open Olympia speaks volumes. Very few people can do that, and he did.
Could he maintain that top three placing next year? That's the question.
Well, can he get back next year? That's even a bigger
I think once he gets in once, I can't imagine them not letting him back in again.
Well, if that's the case, why not come over here and guest pose? Why not come over here and set up shop and start doing some business? We haven't heard hide nor hair of this guy in about 4 months.
Shawn, he probably makes way more money over in Iran because he's a national hero now, essentially.
Yeah, but if you're gonna, it's like acting. You could be over in Iran being their number one actor, but unless you're a Hollywood guy or a New York guy, you're just another actor.
Dorian proved that you didn't have to be in the United States to make money and be popular, so you never know.
But he was here. He lived at Steve Weinberger's gym in New York, Dave. Come on. I was in that political movement.
Wow, yeah, but he didn't do it very often. He made a couple, times a year. He made a couple treks.
Well, I think if Hadi's smart, you don't wait to the last minute to try to get here. You get here like Brandon Curry does. He goes to Kuwait for 3 months. Come over here, train the summer here, do the business here. There's no stress. And this is a guy that could actually move up in the lineup if he's here early on. He tries to pull that last-minute stuff. I'm not so sure it's going to work 2 years in a row.
And he really should learn to speak English because I think it's going to increase his ability to make money too as well.
Well, let's be honest. Speaking English is not the easiest thing to do when you get here, like for the first time in your life. It might be something that he's able to pull off, but even in 1 year, I mean, to what level? Where he's not going to be sitting here talking.
Ramy speaks very well now. I mean, he couldn't speak a lick of English when he first
But Ramy's
started.
been coming for years. I don't know how long Hadi's got in his tank, but this is not a contest of whether you speak English or not. And I like that international flavor because, again, he's representing a whole country. He doesn't have to speak English in my book. He has to look good in my book to be Mr. Olympia.
I just think from a marketing perspective, for himself to make more money.
But you're talking about making money. You're right. Over in Iran, I mean, he's making a ton of. It's not about money for Hadi Choopan right now. It's about winning.
I guess you're right.
Whether he learns to speak English or not, it's not going to determine whether he's Mr. Olympia.
Josh Lenartowicz missed the whole 2019. He had a daughter born right around the Olympia time, and then obviously he was diagnosed with the brain tumor. Obviously, that was a shock. I think he had a really bad year before that prior when Dallas McCarver died. It was a good friend of his. He's had a rough run, but we're going to see him at the Arnold Classic this year. He's set to compete. You and I talked about it. You talked about whether it was a good movement or not a good movement. But I think of stories of 2019, I think Josh has got to be listed in there because it was a surprise. I think a lot of people expected to see Josh on that Olympia stage and that he was going to make a big impact. And once again, life kind of intercedes and we don't get to choose, what happens to us, but it's a matter of how we respond to it and how we overcome those things.
Well, Dave, to go on record, I was threatened by Josh Lenartowicz to never bring up his name in public again. So now the world knows that I was, as a reporter, reporting on our last interview where we talked about his health. We didn't even analyze his physique, did we?
No.
I talked about his health situation, and I was confronted with threats of leaving his name out of my mouth and never to talk about him ever again unless I know what's good for me. So I will take that as a valid threat, an assault on free speech in the media, and I'll leave Josh Lenartowicz's name out of my mouth on all levels because at this age, I don't want to see that kid go to jail, and I don't want to wind up in the cemetery before it's possible. But again, threatening a reporter is not something that you saw Flex Wheeler wanted to kill you 1 year at the FIBO.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this guy at his word because I don't know him that well. Yeah. Whatever happens in Columbus, Ohio for him, hopefully he comes out of it healthy. How about that?
Shawn, you wouldn't be the first. He wouldn't be the first person to threaten you, I'm sure, over the course of your career.
Well, he's the only one that threatened that if I don't stop talking about him and stop talking about what I don't know, that I would be facing some severe Australian consequences. People in Australia, they're a little bit different down under, Dave.
Yeah, you might get buried in the outback there.
Yeah, I'm not going to mess with that guy. I'm going to respect what you say, Josh. You're absolutely right. I don't know all the facts and all the details. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
All right, let's talk about probably I think the most significant and the story that kind of blew the lid off of all the other stories for the 2019. Unfortunately, it's a negative story, and we hate to see negative stories do that, but this overshadowed everything, including I think Brandon Curry's Olympia victory because he wasn't allowed to defend his Olympia title, and that's Shawn Rhoden rape allegations. He was arrested for raping supposedly a girl in Utah. The trial is still ongoing. He was not allowed to compete in the Olympia. It appears, he's not allowed to compete in the Arnold Classic either, even though he was originally on the competitor list, and then he was.
Well, no, he wasn't originally on any list.
Well, I mean, he was on the posters they were releasing, and then they obviously pulled that. I don't really know the story behind that. But the bottom line is that Shawn Rhoden went from being the hero of the 2018 Olympia to being, the guy who potentially could have raped a woman and could wind up spending a lot of time in jail. I think that's got to be the biggest story of 2019. I think that was the most talk of any of the stories that we've mentioned prior. What's your take on the whole? Now that the year is over and it's kind of not as fresh in our mind, obviously the trial will be coming up in 2020. Where does Shawn Rhoden kind of fit into this whole equation?
Well, I mean, my opinion is, listen, the Federation, the Arnold Classic, the Olympia, I think they all did the smart play. The safe thing is to wait and see what happens. It is only an allegation. You're innocent until proven guilty. But in the meantime, the flip side is if you are guilty, you have a guy that could potentially be the reigning Mr. Olympia that benefited financially from the sport, and denied other people the opportunity that abide by the rules. I mean, there's got to be some rules in place that have to do with character. There has to be some rules in place that have to do with protocol. The proper protocol is that this is a bigger issue for Shawn Rhoden than defending the title of the Olympia. This is a bigger issue for Shawn Rhoden than competing in the Arnold Classic. I think if he was a school teacher, if he was an airline pilot, if he was a judge or a police officer, I don't think that they would allow him to continue in the working capacity with the weight of these allegations. Again, he's not being made an example of. I just don't think that any person of status that's facing these types of allegations that's still being litigated should have the opportunity to benefit from continually to represent on a global scale their sport or their profession. If this was your daughter's fourth grade school teacher who's got the same charges and your daughter's got to go to that class, you as a parent have to decide whether or not you keep your kid in the classroom. Sure. You as a parent have to decide whether or not you go after the school, the administration. There's too many moving parts where it's bigger than having him participate. So I think the federation, the organization, and even Arnold and everyone around him did the right thing by saying, handle your personal affairs, and based on the outcome of those personal affairs, we will reinstate you or we will eliminate you altogether, because obviously the consequence of being proven guilty of these charges are that by a preponderance of the evidence, he's found guilty to have committed these charges. And there's three of them. There's rape, there's assault, and there's rape with a foreign object. Those are some heavy charges that are going to come with some stiff penalties. If found guilty, he's not going to be thinking about coming back to bodybuilding. He's going to be sitting in a jail. Yeah. So I don't think our industry needs to litigate that. You or me or the federation. The smart play was put him on the sidelines, let him get his life in order, plan for his future. And based on the outcome, I think his next court date is in April. We'll see what happens then.
Do you think this whole thing will be at least decided one way or another by the time the Olympia comes around?
Dave, this is something that can be played out. I saw the Ronaldo soccer star, and this is a guy that's got multi-millions of dollars, right? You and I wouldn't have to do any of these podcasts and deal for sponsorships and sell our species products. This guy, 2 years later, after thinking the whole thing was settled, got brought back up and drugged back into court, and then it all got dismissed. This whole thing can get dismissed, and then we can talk about the lost wages and the lost opportunity. Right. Mike Tyson lost 3 years of his career, but he was found, to be guilty, even though the girl said, hey, I went to his room at 1 o'clock. I took out my panty shield, and, they had all this evidence of like cooperation, and then it blew up. When it comes to something this sensitive, none of us can really speculate on the possibilities of what could have happened. We need to wait for the outcome, and it could take years, and it could be decided in April. The hands of justice move slow. The fact of the matter is that if this girl is telling the truth, she deserves her day in court. Yeah. No. And none of us were behind those doors. So I'm not passing judgment on Shawn, and I'm not passing judgment on the accuser. I just think it was tragic in terms of the timing. I think it was tragic in terms of the individual. We all have a sense of someone's character, but we don't know what people are capable of. Look at O.J. Simpson for that matter. So let's see what the hands of justice serve up, and hopefully we have an answer in 2020, at least so that Shawn can get on with his life. Yeah, and if Shawn does get exonerated at that point, we could have a very, very, exciting 2020 Mr. Olympia competition. Assuming he wants to come back and do this again.
Well, he wants to do it now, and why wouldn't he want to come back?
Yeah, well, from all accounts on his Instagram, it looks like he hasn't stopped doing it. Yeah. But if you're the victim and you feel like these allegations are true, you want him to be locked up. Right. And the hands of justice will put you where you belong if you're guilty, and then it's a moot point. Let me ask you a question. Let's say he's cleared. Let's say he wins the court case. Does he have any recall in terms of suing anyone in terms of absolutely lost wages? Not. He doesn't because this is something where I think unanimously and across the board, the federation is not denying him the right to make a living. No, I'm not talking about the federation. I'm talking about suing the individual. No, because look, you literally are in our sense of the word, you're guilty before you're innocent, right? Because the allegation has been lobbed out there. Nowhere have I ever seen somebody go back and accuse the accuser and get reparations. I mean, look at Kevin Spacey. If you don't know about Kevin Spacey's situation,
wow,
this guy brought him to court with phone evidence and all this other stuff, and suddenly it evaporated by the time they got to the courtroom. But Kevin Spacey's name was slandered throughout. He was guilty.
Yeah, but 3 accusers are dead.
Have you followed that story? And no one's accused Kevin Spacey of murder.
It's pretty crazy.
However, it all evaporated, but the guy's name was sullied and thrown through the mud. Shawn won't have a course of action in terms of going after someone that's lobbed the accusation. We know, Dave, that this is thousands and thousands of dollars in legal defense.
Yeah.
That entire Olympia purse could be gone in legal defense.
Absolutely.
And you know, I would love to see a law that's enacted that, look, if Shawn's found not guilty, that he has a right, based on whatever evidence he has, to come back and charge this girl with false, allegations. Yeah. But I've never seen it done. I don't even know a court case where that's actually happened, where you can go back and now charge the accuser for falsely accusing him.
Well, I take my hat off to Shawn to continue his training. Some people would have folded and just would have been like, "That's it, I'm done." But he's preparing for battle, and he wants to be ready, and it is smart. I guess if he is cleared, he'll be ready to compete. Whereas some guys might just stop everything, and then they have to first try to get back to where they were. So
it's like right now, it's like the country, Dave. It's like either you like Trump or you hate Trump. There's no middle ground. Either you're cheering for Shawn or you want him to be brought to justice. Yeah. And I've heard both sides of the story from both male and female. I'm still in the middle of the road because I don't have all the facts. None of us do. Yeah. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy in terms of Shawn's character that we know as a bodybuilder. I was there when he turned pro, winning the North Americas. I was there when he got his first contract coming out of the game. So to see him rise up and become Mr. Olympia and then have this thrown at him, when all the facts of the case come out, we could be in for some surprises, Dave, and he may not be the guy we think he was. And on the other hand, the victim may have a valid case, and we're like blown away. I mean, we've seen some crazy things happen, including the Berto Fox and the Craig Titus situation. Yeah. This is right up there with them in terms of the suspense, the level of. If this was something that we saw on regular television, we'd be glued to the TV waiting for the outcome. So we sit and we wait, and hopefully in 2020, Shawn gets some resolution. Either way, it's tragic for both parties involved.
Yeah. Well, I want to, once again, just send out my best regards to everyone in 2020. 2019 certainly was a year we had a lot of stories to report on, and whether they be good, bad, people we lost, new champions crowned. I just want to thank you, Shawn, for helping us report the news, even if you were threatened a few times. And
I did survive, but listen, Dave, we got to tee up 2020 because we recapped 2019, but going into 2020, you got to remember, Arnold's got his January 18th strongman competition at the pier in Santa Monica.
Yeah, that's cool. Officially, that's really cool. I don't know if a lot of
officially going to kick it off.
The Santa Monica Pier is awesome,
Yeah, that'll officially kick off our season because it's an Arnold event, right? And he's got everybody there. He had Mario Lopez there. He had Lou Ferrigno was there. He had everybody was there. Of course, Franco is going to be sorely missed this year, but that'll set things in motion for the 32nd Arnold Classic coming up the first weekend in March 4th to the 8th, which is, again, the biggest deal that we have. We cannot lose sight of the fact that Wings of Strength has effectively brought back the Miss Olympia Championships to the Olympia weekend, which is really one of the bigger stories coming out of 2019 that's kind of gotten glossed over. The question is, will Iris Kyle come back? I mean, she didn't retire, okay? She did not retire, and she said that she has not stopped training. That's a huge X factor going into this Olympia because she's got a lifetime qualification with 10 Olympia titles.
Right.
So we can't rule her out. She's training with Hidatati Yamagishi. Yaksani Orikin is putting up pictures on her Instagram. I don't know that we won't see Alina Popa, who was second in her last Olympia, come out of retirement.
Another out of retirement. You want to talk about out of retirement? Oksana Grishina is coming back to the Fitness Olympia this year. So
that's another huge addition to the Olympia weekend. Yeah. And, of course, we got The Rock with his Athleticon coming onto the calendar year in October. But I got to say, Dave, a lot of people are forgetting the fact that this was effectively the biggest Olympia weekend we ever had in terms of prize money. The prize money was ridiculously high by comparison to any of the years before it.
Yeah.
That can't be lost. I was there. I witnessed that dispersion of that prize money. The athletes have to feel good about that. And, of course, Dan Solomon ran the very first one, which now it seems like there's a lot more inclusion from all sides of the fence. Because remember, it's kind of like politics. It's like you're the Democrat, you're Republican, stay away.
The greatest thing that ever happened to the Olympia, and I've been on record as saying it before, was Dan Solomon. He has raised the bar so high. in 1 year, and I know that you can't do anything in 1 year. He basically took the reins and, did his best the first year, and he brought in a lot of money and he brought in a lot of new changes. But I think over the next 5 years will define his legacy as the promoter of the Olympia. I think they put it in the right hands. He's got vision. He understands that everyone has to kind of work together. There can't be two sides or three sides.
There's always been two or three sides
them.
in the past. Yeah, there's always been this division.
Everyone should promote the Olympia in the industry. Everyone should be included, not excluded the way it used to be. And that's why Dan is going to be successful at what he's doing. And that's why they got the right man at the helm there.
He comes with a degree in media. That's where he comes from. He had the Pro Bodybuilding Weekly show for 10 plus years.
Right, but he's also a politician. He knows how to sit down at the table with people and get people to agree with each other and get the job done. And that's the most important thing to making things work. Getting people to work together. Because if everyone's against each other, nothing gets done. You know.
Yeah, and then all you got to do is look at the type of sponsors that are coming to the show that didn't exist before. They're now coming, and it was a huge addition with Mark Wahlberg. And I know 2020. They're holding back, but I know there's going to be even more surprises for 2020. So for all the Monday morning quarterbacks sitting at home saying it's on the decline, all you have to do is look at the people that actually participate, or better yet, buy a ticket and go. I'm fortunate to have never missed it since 1988.
I'm excited to see what Flex Lewis is going to bring to the stage in the open division in 2020.
Huge. So. We cannot omit the fact that James coming back, which I said 2 years ago, he's an open bodybuilder waiting to freaking explode. That is a huge addition to the landscape of the 2020 Olympia.
Yeah. Well, Shawn, thank you so much. Have a great new year. Be safe, and we'll see you back next year.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm Dave Palumbo. Everyone out there, have a happy new year, and we'll see you next year.